A cold-hearted CEO unleashed his men to intimidate a young widow aiming to seize her land. They trapped her and her 7-year-old daughter in a desperate corner. They assumed she was alone, that she was powerless, and when they knocked the mother to the ground, they thought their victory was sealed. But they made 2 deadly errors they never saw coming. They had no idea the quiet man next door was a Navy SEAL, nor that the little girl's closest companion was his 90-pound military K-9, silently waiting for the single word that would send him into action. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story stirs something deep in your soul, please subscribe for more. Oak Haven, Washington wasn't just a place, it was a refuge, an escape. A tiny speck of civilization pressed between the endless gray roar of the Pacific and the sprawling emerald embrace of Olympic National Forest. The air was thick with salt and the sharp, fresh scent of pine carrying a chill that cut deep into your bones. A dampiness that settled into every fiber, while the persistent mist clung to towering ferns and transformed the rocky coast into a stage of brooding, shadowed giants. Jack Carter embraced the cold. It felt real, washing away desert dust and the metallic stench of gunpowder from his mind. He stood on the porch of the humble little rental cabin he had claimed for the month, simple, nestled just inside the edge of the forest. Jack was a Navy SEAL, although on leave was a polite fiction. This was his recovery. Broad shoulders still tense beneath a worn flannel shirt, his mind even tighter, and eyes as gray as the stormy sea, having witnessed far too much. He was here to see nothing at all. Beside him, Kodiak exhaled a long, low sigh, his breath misting in the cool air. Kodiak wasn't just a dog, he was a partner. A 90-pound German Shepherd Kodiak was a military working dog, discipline, loyalty, and fierce instinct all wrapped in one. His black and tan coat thick, perfectly built for the damp climate, and his ears always standing alert with sharp intelligence. Their quiet healing was unexpectedly interrupted by a persistent visitor, Lily Hayes, a 7-year-old girl, small for her age, with bright, curious eyes that caught every detail and hair like sun-bleached driftwood. She lived just beyond the trees in the house, perched closer to the rocky cliffs overlooking the ocean. Unlike most, Lily wasn't scared of Kodiak. Where others saw sharp intensity in his gaze and the raw power in his muscles, Lily saw a friend. She appeared at their clearing's edge 3 days ago, a small figure wrapped in a bright yellow raincoat. Jack observed, frozen, as she approached the massive dog. But Kodiak, sensing the gentle heart of the child, lowered his head, and Lily laughed, gently scratching behind his ears. Now she visits every afternoon, often just sitting on the steps, sharing snacks with the dog, and whispering elaborate stories only he could hear. Jack found himself waiting for that small figure each day, the only moment that felt truly normal. The afternoon shadows lengthened the gray sky, heavy, as early evenings slid in light rain, a mist more than a storm, began to tap softly on the windows. Inside, Jack was cleaning his gear, a ritual he couldn't shake, a grounding habit that centered him. Meanwhile, Kodiak lay dozing by the hearth, the very embodiment of peaceful home. His strong frame finally softened in the fire's warmth. Suddenly, an eerie silence fell over Jack, no sound reaching his ears. Beyond the steady tap of rain and the fire's crackle, Kodiak shifted instantly from deep sleep to full battle alert in the blink of an eye. His head snapped upward, ears flattened back, a low, guttural rumble rising from his chest. Not a bark, but a stark warning. Jack froze his hand still. He trusted this dog with his life had done so countless times before. Kodiak rose silently, creeping toward the window, his body tense, fur bristling along his spine, eyes locked on the Hayes house. His growl grew deeper, shifting into a muted, urgent huff. This wasn't the warning he gave for some deer or raccoon. This was the kind of alert Kodiak reserved for real danger. Jack moved beside him, eyes scanning the dark tree line. "What is it, boy?" Kodiak didn't glance back. He dashed to the door, barking sharp and loud once, then scratching frantically at the wood. His whine brimmed with raw anxiety, one Jack had heard only in the thick of combat zones, a cold, familiar rush of adrenaline. Jack's recovery snapped shut. It was time. "Show me," he ordered, pulling his jacket from the hook and rushing out. Within seconds, rain slammed against his face, but Kodiak was already a streak of black and tan vanishing through the soaked ferns, following a trail Jack hadn't known existed. His boots pounding the sodden earth, the rain sharpened icy and stinging his skin. He burst through the tree line into Hayes Properties clearing, and the scene unfurled in agonizing slow motion. 3 men, rough and out of place, stood on the lawn clad in muddied work boots and flannel fit for a logging site, not a family home porch. They had surrounded Ilara Hayes Lily's mother, who stood defiant before her front door. Ilara was slender, her dark hair hastily tied back. Jack had only glimpsed her from afar, but up close her fierce, terrified strength was unmistakable. She struggled desperately to pull Lily behind her, a shield between her daughter and the intruders. The little girl sobbed, clutching a ragged teddy bear, her bright yellow raincoat a jarring symbol of innocence amid the grim face-off. The man in the center was clearly the leader, Milo, thin and wiry, greasy hair in a ponytail, eyes colder than anything Jack had ever encountered. Last time Jack faced Milo, the man sneered, his harsh voice cutting through the damp air. "Mr. Vane wants that signature. He's done asking nicely." Milo spat, his tone sharp and threatening. Ilara's voice trembled, yet she stood firm, one arm locked around her daughter. "I said this house isn't for sale. It belonged to my husband, it's my daughter's now. Leave us alone." From behind her mother's legs, Lily screamed, "Please just go away!" Milo laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. "You're not listening." He stepped onto the porch. Ilara pushed Lily back instinctively, shielding her with everything she had. "Get off my property." Milo's face twisted in contempt at her defiance, then raised his hand and struck. The blow was brutal, a sharp backhand slap snapping Ilara's head to the side, the sickening smack cutting through the coastal air. She cried out, stumbling against the porch railing, one hand shooting to her cheek. Lily's shriek was a piercing scream of pure terror that sliced through the rain and punched into Jack's chest that was the final straw. "Hey!" Jack's voice wasn't a yell. It was a command, a deep, fierce bark of authority that halted every man dead in their tracks. The 3 thugs spun around, startled by his sudden arrival. They spotted Jack, a towering figure, but only saw him as a single man. They sneered, sizing him up with cocky grins. "Mind your own business, buddy!" One of the bigger men growled, stepping forward with a menacing glare. "This is private property." Milo, eyeing Ilara, collapsed on the ground, curled his lip, and raised his boot. As if to deliver a cruel blow while she lay helpless, Jack's voice remained calm. He didn't need to speak loudly, just a single quiet command. The dog, standing motionless at his side, responded instantly to the soft word Kodiak. Kodiak wasn't just an agitated barker. He was a weapon, a concentrated force of 90 pounds hurtling from the shadows. He didn't aim for a limb. His target was the first thug, the one closest to Lily Square, striking him square in the chest. The man collapsed with a sickening thud, a strangled gurgle escaping as air was forced from his lungs, his head knocking hard against the porch steps. The other 2 men's eyes widened in disbelief at the dog's blistering speed, but Jack was already on the move. He crossed the 20-foot gap in just 3 powerful strides. The bigger thug who had threatened him raised his fists in defiance. Without wasting a punch, Jack met the clumsy swing with a precise palm strike straight to the man's nose. A wet, crushing snap of cartilage sounded before the thug could even feel pain. Jack followed quickly. He delivered a sharp, crippling kick to the man's knee, folding him in agony as the limb buckled awkwardly. In less than 3 seconds, Milo the leader stood frozen, staring at his fallen men, one groaning on the ground, the other clutching his mangled knee. His gaze shifted to Kodiak. The dog loomed over the first thug, teeth bared a deep, savage growl vibrating in the air. His eyes locked onto Milo, then shifted to Jack, who stood calm and collected rain dripping from his soaked hair. Jack simply tilted his head, daring him, "It's your move." Milo, all bluster but no fight, stumbled backward, hands raised in surrender, fear draining his menace. "Hey man, no problem. We're out of here." Jack strode past, kneeling beside Ilara to offer his hand. "You okay?" Her whole body trembled, clutching her cheek, as tears welled in her eyes. But her spirit stayed unbroken. "Fight back," Jack urged Milo without even glancing his way. Panicked, Milo dragged his whimpering comrades toward a battered pickup parked haphazardly nearby. At that moment, Lily sprinted from behind the porch swing past her mother and buried her face in Kodiak's thick fur. Mission accomplished, the dog softened instantly, gently licking the tears streaming down her cheek's tail, giving a single affectionate thump. "This ain't over," Milo shouted from the safety of the truck, voice breaking with forced bravado. "You don't know who you're dealing with. Mr. Vane's gonna hear about this." The engine roared to life, spinning gravel and fishtailing wildly down the muddy driveway, then vanished onto the main road. And Lily's soft sobs were muffled against Kodiak's thick fur as Jack rose while Alara drew her daughter into a protective embrace. The woman's lip was cracked, dark bruise blooming fiercely on her cheek. I'm Alara Hayes," she said, voice quivering. "This is Lily." "Jack Carter," he replied steadily, his hard-earned calm flickering as his vacation ended. "And that's Kodiak. Let's get you both inside. You need to tell me exactly who Mr. Vane is." Inside Alara Hayes' home, the harsh wind outside was forgotten. The warmth wrapped around them thick with the scent of aged books and chamomile tea. Photographs adorned the walls, a man smiling softly, eyes gentle. Lily as a baby, moments of family frozen timelessly. This was a refuge that had been breached. Jack moved with deliberate calm, his practiced detachment more soothing than hollow words. Carefully, he cleaned the cut on Alara's lip, using the first aid kit she produced. His large hands were tender, contradictory to their size. Alara, a woman whose resilience was etched deep in the unwavering gaze of her dark eyes, watched him not in fear, but with tired, measured scrutiny. Across the modest living room, Lily sat on the floor, arms clenched tightly around Kodiak's neck. The vast dog still as stone, a living fortress. Every now and then, Kodiak turned his massive head to gently nudge her with his nose, quiet comfort, amidst her hiccuping sobs muffled in his fur. "His name is Silas Vane," Alara said quietly, voice taut, flinching as Jack applied a delicate butterfly bandage. "He runs Apex Holdings," she revealed. "They've been snapping up land all along this rugged coastline for over a year. He wants this house. More than that, he wants the cove." "The cove?" Jack asked, his focus sharpening naturally on the task at hand. Alara pointed vaguely behind the house. "It's a natural deep-water inlet. My husband, a marine biologist, called it a geological marvel. The cliffs drop sharply. A large boat could slip right up to shore, hidden from the sea lanes and roads. Vane dreams of making it an exclusive private marina for his resort," she said, a bitter laugh escaping. "I call it my home." Jack finished tending her wounds and met her steady gaze. The bruise and fear were visible, but beneath it lay unshakable steel. "You're not selling," he said, knowing the answer was never truly a question. She whispered, eyes flicking toward the photographs on the walls. "This is all I have left of him. All Lily has." Jack nodded slowly, understanding the weight of those losses. He'd seen predatory cruelty like this in far-flung lawless corners of the world, but never expected that shadow to fall here, in the misty stillness of the Pacific Northwest. The line had been crossed from a business dispute to raw, violent intimidation the moment Milo's fist connected. His leave, his search for peace, they were luxuries he could no longer afford. He had been a bystander. Now he was in the fight. Standing, Jack approached the window, eyes scanning the darkening horizon. "Stay inside. Lock your doors," he instructed firmly. Stepping outside, the cold air hit him with sharp clarity. He moved to the edge of the woods and retrieved a satellite phone from his gear, something he never left behind. With practiced fingers, he dialed a number from memory. He rose slowly and approached the window, gazing out into the fading twilight. "Stay inside and make sure all your doors are locked tight. I have to make a call." The crisp night air hit his face like a jolt as he stepped toward the forest's edge. From his pocket, he retrieved a satellite phone, a lifeline he never left behind. and dialed a number he had memorized. The phone rang twice before a steady, calm voice answered. "Ghost, you there?" Jack's voice stayed quiet as he replied, "Where else would I be?" The voice on the other end was Ben, known as Ghost Riley. Ben was Jack's teammate, a Navy SEAL communications and tech genius whose skill in bending electronics to his command was legendary. Leaner than Jack, with a lightning-fast mind and a calmness that constantly unnerved their superiors, Ben was a force of nature. "I thought you'd gone full wilderness guru meditating with bears or something," Jack joked softly. "Tum-tum. Change of plans. I'm in a town named Oak Haven, Washington. I need you here." There was no pause, no questions asked. "Send me the coordinates. What's the threat level?" "For you, it's a level 1. For the locals, it's a full 5. A mother and her child are being strong-armed off their property by a corporate thug squad. It's turned physical, and the local law is compromised." Jack hesitated for a moment. "Bring your full kit, Ghost. The subtle stuff. I have a feeling this goes deeper than just a real estate fight." "On my way," Ben said. Then the line went dead. The next morning, Jack rolled into the tiny cluster of buildings that made up Oak Haven's town center, a place clinging to the edge of the continent. A single main street, a diner, a general store, and a small red brick building with a fading sign reading Oak Haven Sheriff's Department. Behind the desk was exactly who Jack had hoped she'd be: tired, but not beaten. Sheriff Eva Rostova was in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent gray eyes and dark hair tightly pulled into a no-nonsense bun. Her posture spoke of a long and relentless fight uphill. The room smelled of stale coffee and damp files as she listened to Jack's recounting of the previous night. She said nothing as he spoke, her face an unreadable mask. When he finished, she leaned back in her squeaky chair and let out a weary sigh. "Silas Vane," she said, the name tasting like bitter ash in her mouth. "And that mutt of his Councilman Warren. You got the muscle I have to deal with the politician." She explained more as Jack absorbed her words. "Councilman Warren is on Vane's payroll. I can't prove it." Rostova admitted, frustration clear in her voice. "Since Vane and Apex Holdings showed up, Warren has pushed through every zoning change and permit they wanted. He blocks every question I try to ask. Vane moves just inside the law. His lawyers are sharks. Every time one of his men crosses a line like what happened to Mrs. Hayes, they vanish before I can get a warrant, and a high-priced attorney shows up claiming it's all a misunderstanding." "That was assault," Jack said flatly, despite 3 of my men insisting she attacked first. Rostova shook her head. "I'm not saying I don't believe you. I'm saying my hands are tied. I have 2 deputies and I suspect one reports more to Warren than to me. Vane promised jobs with his resort. People want to hope, so they're too afraid to fight back." Jack stood, decision made. The law couldn't be counted on, not yet. "Thank you for your time." As he reached the door, Sheriff Rostova called out, "Carter, you've got a certain gift. I see it. Just remember there's a fine line between helping and making things worse. Vane's a snake, not a wolf. Don't let him bite you. There's a fine line between lending a hand and fueling the fire. Vane is a sly serpent, not a fierce wolf. Watch your step." Jack came back to the Hayes estate, but didn't step inside. He told Alera he was heading out for a walk. That was a huge understatement, as Kodiak led the way, a quiet shadow slipping through the brush, while Jack began his own careful scouting. Skirting the house, he made his way to the cliffs overlooking the private cove. Alera had described the sight sent a chill up his spine. It was exactly like she said, only worse, a flawlessly concealed harbor. The water was deep, dark, and still sheltered from the wild Pacific by 2 massive stone arms. The cliffs rose sharply. Those cliffs formed a natural barrier, shielding everything from land-based eyes. The only way in was through her land. No resort developer would ever want this too risky, inefficient a nightmare logistically, but for someone who needed invisibility, it was flawless. Jack pressed himself flat against the cold earth, pulling a small monocular from his jacket. Eyes sharp as a hawk as he scanned the terrain. He spotted a deep channel wide enough to handle a sizable boat, and natural caves etched into the cliff face near the waterline, perfect for hiding cargo. He found blind spots beyond the highway's reach, and a thick canopy of ancient trees that would hide them even from satellite surveillance. This wasn't a spot for yachts, it was meant for smuggling. The deep, quiet water and steep cliffs made it ideal for a small submersible, just the kind used for moving high-value, low-volume shipments. Drugs, weapons technology. Silas Vane wasn't building a resort. No, he was constructing a private, illegal, and completely invisible port right under everyone's noses. And Alara and Lily Hayes were living right on top of his secret loading dock. The thin line Sheriff Rostova had mentioned was already erased the moment Vane cast his eyes on this land. This was far beyond a dispute, it had become a battlefield, and Jack Carter was standing right at its edge. Ben Ghost Riley appeared as the morning mist began to lift, the forest's edge emerging from the haze as silently as his nickname promised. Unlike Jack's solid oak frame, Ben moved like whipcord steel fluid, efficient, conserving every motion. His sharp, focused gaze absorbed everything all at once, carrying 2 unremarkable duffel bags that Jack knew held more advanced surveillance and communications equipment than many small nations had at their disposal. Cozy Ben remarked, with a wry half-smile, eyeing Jack's rental cabin. "Does it come with a banjo? Let's get set up. Our target's Silas Vane. His company's Apex Holdings, and he's got a local politician, Councilman Warren, and a crew of thugs led by a guy named Milo." Moving with the silent precision born from years in hostile territory, Ben got to work. He established a small encrypted mesh network linking their satellite phones, and began deploying discrete motion sensors and cameras around Alara's property, a digital ghost weaving a web of unseen technology. "So Vane wants the Cove as a private port," Ben mused, fingers flying over a rugged laptop keyboard. "That's both bold and reckless. You don't bring this kind of firepower." What was supposed to be a simple smuggling run was hiding something deeper, and to uncover the truth, they needed to move out. Their destination, the beating heart of the town, where fear was pulsing just beneath the surface, the Salty Spoon Diner. That diner was Oak Haven's gathering place, a narrow, weathered building filled with red vinyl booths and a counter that had witnessed better days long ago. The air hung heavy with the scent of sizzling bacon, strong brewed coffee, and a simmering tension as Jack and Ben stepped inside. Conversations faltered to whispers, every pair of eyes locked on them, 2 strangers, big and purposeful, unmistakably outsiders. They moved with a quiet determination Oak Haven hadn't witnessed in years, settling into a booth at the back. A vantage point perfectly placed to watch both the entrance and the entire diner. They had barely been seated 5 minutes when a woman approached, late 20s, her wild red hair tumbling freely around her face. Freckles spread like a constellation across her nose, with moss-green eyes, sharp and too alert for a town this small. Clutching a reporter's notepad like a shield, she spoke straight out. No fluff. "You're not here for the clam chowder. I'm Chloe Jenkins with the Oak Haven Chronicle." She said a tiny 2-page newsletter, but it counts. Behind the counter, someone called Chloe, but she paid no heed and stayed focused on them. "I saw what went down at the Hayes place yesterday," she started. "A friend in the sheriff's office told me you're Jack Carter." Then she glanced at Ben. "Him, I don't know. He is with me," Jack replied simply. "This Apex Holdings, they've been a poison here for a year." Chloe leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Vane's buying up land piece by piece. I've been tracking their acquisitions. They're hidden behind layers of shell companies, a labyrinth of shady business like a Matryoshka doll of corruption. But nobody talks too scared. You're not though, right?" She looked at Jack with a flicker of hope. Before Jack could answer, the diner bell chimed sharply, and the atmosphere shifted heavy, suffocating. Milo strode in, flanked by 2 even tougher-looking thugs, meaner, more disciplined than yesterday's crew. Ignoring everyone else, his dead eyes locked on Jack's booth with cold intent. He swaggered over, a cruel smile cutting across his face, leaning on the table till his knuckles went white. Well, if it isn't the town's hero," Milo's sneered voice loud enough to carry across the diner. "Brought yourself a buddy? Think that's gonna tip the scales?" Jack held his gaze steady, ice cold. "You should have stayed out of it." Milo shot back, smirk growing wider. "Mr. Vane's patient, but he's running out of it. He asked me to pass a message," Milo said, voice dripping with menace. Sometimes fires start on their own. Accidents happen especially in these old joints with faulty wiring. He leaned closer, voice dropping to a sinister whisper that cut deeper than any shout. And that little girl, she sure is attached to that big dog of yours. It'd be a damn shame if something happened to him. Ben, who had been watching quietly, set his coffee down with a soft but telling click, a sound that slammed into the thick silence. He didn't glance at Milo, but his presence alone was a silent, clear threat. Milo straightened his eyes, flicking nervously between the two men. He had planned to intimidate just one man, but he hadn't expected to face two who stood utterly unshaken. He let out a rough, forced laugh, just a warning. "Have a nice day," he spat before turning and striding out. His men trailed behind him like scavenging vultures. The diner fell into a heavy silence, locals fixated on their meals, avoiding all eye contact. At that moment, a sleek black sedan glided into Alara Hayes' driveway with quiet precision. A man stepped out, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. He wasn't a thug. This was Councilman Warren, a man in his 50s with a mane of silver hair. His smile was the polished mask of a seasoned politician, but his eyes held the cold, calculating glare of a shark. He carried himself with an undeserved air of command. Alara met him on the porch, clutching Lily's hand tightly. "Alara, my dear," Warren began, his voice dripping with feigned concern. "I rushed over as soon as I heard about the distressing events yesterday. As a representative of this community, I am deeply troubled. Are you?" Alara's voice sliced through like ice. "Did your boss send you?" Warren's smile didn't waver. "Now, Alara, that's an unfair claim. I'm here for you and for Lily." He bent down, forcing a sociable smile at the little girl who shrank behind her mother. "The truth is, this town has its responsibilities. We must ensure the safety and welfare of our children. An incident like yesterday, a violent confrontation on your property, raises serious concerns. The real question is why your sheriff hasn't arrested the men who attacked me, or rather allegedly attacked you." He corrected smoothly. "Their official statement says you were hysterical and initiated the attack. The optics are troubling. A single mother, living in isolation, unable to guarantee a safe environment." Standing tall now, his tone shifted from faux concern to cold, bureaucratic detachment. "I've had an initial discussion with Child Protective Services." Alara's blood ran ice cold. "You wouldn't. It's out of my hands," Warren said, spreading his palms helplessly. "It's protocol. Whenever a child witnesses a violent episode, questions about guardianship and child safety automatically come into play. An investigation will follow interviews, home inspections. It can become a grueling, unpleasant ordeal unless the root cause of this instability is removed." The threat hung heavy in the air, dreadful and suffocating. He wasn't simply threatening to seize her land anymore. Now he was aiming to take her child. "Mr. Vane's offer still stands," Warren added quietly. "In fact, under the circumstances, he's authorized me to sweeten it. A gesture of goodwill. Sell your property. Alara, take the money, move to the city, and give Lily a safe, stable life. It's what's best for her. Everyone understands that." He slipped a business card onto the porch railing. "Think it over. You have 24 hours before I file my official report." Without another word, he turned and returned to his car, leaving Alara frozen on the porch, her whole body quivering not out of personal fear, but with the raw, primal terror of a mother defending her child. When Jack and Ben came back, they found her inside, her gaze vacant, staring deeply out the window. Her face drained of color, haunted by a new, profound fear. The bruise on her cheek paled in comparison to the invisible wound beneath. Her complexion drained with a fresh wave of fear, and the bruise on her cheek was a mere scratch compared to the deeper scars she carried inside. Warren had just landed the blow. They were under siege from two fierce fronts, the brutal threats of men like Milo, and the soul-destroying chokehold of bureaucrats like Warren. The noose was tightening from every direction. Silas Vane was a man unaccustomed to losing. He sat in a sleek, glass-walled office staring out over the restless gray Pacific. This stark, modern fortress served as Apex Holdings' local base of operations. He was sculpted for this kind of cold, calculated world. Impeccably tailored suit, razor-sharp haircut, and a face that never betrayed a true smile. To Vane, life was a game of chess. People were merely pieces to be moved, sacrificed, and cast aside when no longer useful. Milo and his quarrymen had been reckless but effective pawns. Vane ended their contracts with a single ruthless text. Then he placed another call. The man who answered stood worlds apart from Milo. His name was Kale, and he spoke with a measured, controlled monotone. A former Special Forces operative turned head of a private security firm, specializing in ruthless asset reclamation. Kale was a consummate professional, a predator who struck with precision, and his fee was nothing short of staggering. "Things have gotten complicated," Vane said, watching a storm brew over the ocean. The target site is now occupied by an unknown man, highly capable, accompanied by a trained dog. "My initial team was neutralized. Amateurs are costly, Mr. Vane." Kale's voice was cold, stripped of any judgment. "My team is different. We'll need full satellite coverage, continuous logistical backup, and complete freedom to operate. We will monitor, strategize, and execute. The property will be cleared, and the occupants will be—" Vane interjected, his curiosity piqued. "That depends on their willingness to cooperate," Kale replied. Then the line cut out. A surge of grim satisfaction washed over Vane. The game had just elevated. The clumsy pawns were replaced. The knights and rooks had entered the battle. The first sign came not from a human, but from Ben's laptop nestled in Jack's cabin. Surrounded by a tangled web of cables and glowing screens streaming data, Ben announced, "New players have arrived." His fingers danced across the keyboard. The radio frequencies around the property are lighting up. They're using encrypted, frequency-hopping comms. Military grade, he noted. Milo's crew was still fumbling with cheap walkie-talkies. Ben directed attention to another screen, showing a thermal overlay of the forest around them. "I'm picking up faint heat signatures from multiple stationary spots. These aren't intruders wandering the woods, they're entrenched. They're hunters." A familiar cold knot tightened in Jack's gut. This was the escalation he feared. "How many?" he asked. "At least 4 teams each, with 2 operatives, full perimeter established." Every angle of the house was under watchful eyes. Confirmation came later that afternoon. Ilara determined to keep some normalcy, for Lily insisted on their daily walk. Jack consented on his conditions. He and Kodiak would scout ahead first. Lily, gripping Kodiak's leash, tightly walked, nestled between Jack and her mother. Deep in the forest, they followed a path blanketed with damp pine needles when everything suddenly changed. Kodiak froze instantly. No growl, no bark, but his entire body went rigid head low, ears pivoting sharply to lock onto a distant sound. Somewhere high in the thick canopy of a towering Douglas fir, a low, barely perceptible rumble pulsated deep in his chest. Lily, sensing the tension radiating from Kodiak, halted beside him, her small face etched with worry. Jack's hand instinctively slid to the pistol concealed beneath his jacket. He followed Kodiak's steady gaze and saw nothing but a tangled thicket of branches and shadows deep in forest green. Ben's sensors hadn't detected anything this close. "What is it, boy?" Jack whispered. Kodiak stayed perfectly still. Like a living statue, he pointed toward an unseen menace. Jack, a seasoned operator, knew without a doubt they were being watched. Not just watched, but hunted. The weight of invisible eyes pressed on him. Suddenly, Jack pivoted, changing their path, leading them back toward the safety of the house. "All right, team, I think that's enough fresh air for today. Who's up for some hot chocolate?" He said, his voice light for Ilara and Lily's sake, avoiding any glance back at the ominous tree. But deep down he knew the rules had shifted. While Vane's operatives spun their web, something else was stirring, something raw and fierce. In Oakhaven, it wasn't a coordinated resistance, it was pure instinct. A quiet, unyielding defiance from a community pushed to its limits. Jack witnessed it himself when he drove into town for supplies. An Apex-holding survey truck sat abandoned on the roadside, all 4 tires mysteriously shredded. The driver cursed into his phone. Frustration etched on his face. Nearby, an old man with a weathered face etched like a sea chart watched from the porch of the general store, slowly carving a piece of driftwood. The man was Jed, a retired fisherman who'd known Ilara's husband since childhood. He gave Jack a slow, deliberate nod of understanding. Later at the docks, Jack caught two fishermen talking. Heard that shipment of drilling gear for Apex got sent up to Nia Bay by mistake, one said, as he fixed his net. Shame. Probably gonna take a week to get that equipment back down here. The other grunted in agreement. GPS out here can be tricky. It was small-scale sabotage. Plausible deniability, but effective. They were buying Jack and his team the one thing they desperately needed: time. They couldn't face Vane's men head-on, but they could jam the gears, throw sand in the machine. They were protecting one of their own, in the only way they knew how. Ben confirmed the impact of their sabotage later that night. Vane's construction timetable is ruined, he reported, showing Jack satellite images from a week ago alongside current ones. Almost no progress at the main site. Equipment keeps breaking down. Shipments running late. The locals are holding them off. But Kale's team wasn't here to build a resort, they were here to clear an obstacle. Ben's equipment revealed just how trained and ruthless they were. They're not just watching the house. Jack, he said grimly. They're profiling you, using long-range parabolic microphones to eavesdrop on every conversation, mapping your every movement, Alera's, even the kids. They're creating a detailed pattern of life. Pulling up a new screen Ben added last night after everyone was asleep, they ran a low-power thermal sweep of the entire house. Jack felt a deep violation. These men weren't just perimeter threats. They'd infiltrated the very walls, peeling back privacy layer by layer, turning a family's sanctuary into a tactical blueprint. Kodiak sensed it too. Restless, pacing the cabin by night, letting out low growls at shadows no one else could see. His bond with Lily had grown fiercely protective. He refused to let the little girl out of his sight, always placing himself between her and any threat. A silent, furry sentinel, Kodiak's anxiety was a truer warning of danger than any gadget Ben had. On a deep instinctive level, he sensed the hunters were closing in. The chapter concluded not with a clash, but with a silent, bone-chilling truth. Late that night, Jack stood on his porch, eyes piercing the dark toward Alara's home, where a lone light flickered in the window. The rain had returned, drumming softly, a steady pulse against the rooftop. Kyle's team prowled out there, soaked and shivering in the cold, watching, waiting, scheming. These weren't the bungling thugs he'd dealt with before. They were professionals, just like him, and they were coming. Kodiak's quiet warnings and the subtle sabotage had only bought them precious moments. But those moments were slipping away. This was no longer about scaring a widow from her land. This was the groundwork for an attack. Silas Vane watched the storm gather from his office window until it finally shattered Oak Haven with the wrath of a relentless deity. Rain pummeled down in fierce torrents, and the wind screamed through towering firs, ripping branches with a howl that sounded like agony. It was the perfect night for bloodshed, nature's chaos masking the turmoil stirred by men. Inside Kyle's mobile command van, hidden miles away on a logging road, the storm was irrelevant. He and his six-man squad were creatures of cold, precise strategy. They observed the world through the relentless, digital gaze of thermal scopes and drone feeds. Target analysis complete. Kyle's voice cut steady through the storm's roar. Carter and tech specialist Riley are in the rental cabin. The woman and child are inside the main house. Standard patrol routes, predictable. He tapped the schematic on his screen. Alpha team breaches the main house here, secure the child. Bravo team suppresses the cabin, keeping Carter and Riley pinned down. We're in and out within 5 minutes extraction by the coast road. Any questions? None? They were seasoned professionals armed with technology, rigorous training, and the element of surprise. They thought they held total control. They were wrong. They're moving. Ben's voice was a quiet whisper into Jack's ear. They weren't inside the cabin. They were holed up in a fortified nest, having spent the day digging beneath the roots of a fallen cedar tree, a perfect sniper's refuge, invisible to thermal detection. The cabin was a phantom. Ben had looped thermal data from the night before, casting ghostly images of two sleeping men across Kyle's monitors, and created a repeating, electronic signal mimicking their sat phones. To the attackers, the targets were right where they belonged. Are Ilara and Lily safe? Jack asked, peering through his night vision scope. Locked in the cellar, Ilara held a radio. She was fully aware of the plan. Inside the main house, Ilara had done exactly as Jack ordered. She took Lily and Kodiak down to the fortified storm cellar beneath the kitchen. Lily lay asleep, curled up against Kodiak's warm, steady presence, untouched by the looming threat. But Ilara's eyes remained wide open, gripping her walkie-talkie tightly, heart hammering a frantic beat against her ribs. She wasn't a helpless victim waiting for rescue. She was an active part of the trap. Jack scanned the woods through the relentless rain, spotting 4 shapes moving silently with the deadly grace of trained hunters, closing in on the main house. "Bravo team," he whispered gratefully. "Bravo team's at the door." Ilara Jack murmured softly into his radio. "On my signal." The 4 men arranged themselves silently and with cold efficiency on her porch, the lead man reaching out to the door. "Now," Jack whispered. Ilara flipped a single switch on a box Jack had handed her outside. A cluster of powerful, motion-activated floodlights salvaged from an old fishing boat and rigged by Ben burst to life. The night was shredded by an intense, blinding glare. The enemy operators, their night vision shattered, stumbled back, cursing and blinded by the sudden light assault. At that very moment, Ben unleashed his own digital nightmare. He hijacked their encrypted communication channel, but instead of static, he sent out a piercing, high-frequency squeal that was agonizingly painful through their earpieces. The men ripped the devices off their ears, their vital link to each other severed, and then came the ghost. From the deep shadows beneath the porch, a silent, dark shape erupted into motion. Kodiak. Jack had sent him out just moments before. No bark, no sound, just raw speed. Kodiak charged the last man in the line, his jaws locking fiercely onto the man's thigh. The operator shouted a scream of pure shock and agony, collapsing into a tangle of arms and gear. The remaining 3, still dazed, spun to face this new threat that was their fatal mistake. 2 shots rang out from the woods, muffled almost entirely by the storm's howl, each hitting their mark. 2 more men crumpled, their legs taken out by Jack's sharp, non-lethal shots. The mission was capture, not kill. The last man standing, the point man, panicked. He raised his rifle toward the house. Before he could fire, Ben, having slipped to a flanking position, was upon him. It was quick, brutal, and silent. Alpha Team was neutralized in less than 30 seconds at the cabin. Meanwhile, Bravo Team's assault was just beginning. Thinking their targets were pinned down, they burst in. The point man kicked the door ajar, only to be met with empty silence. "They're not here!" he shouted, voice raw and frantic without his comms. "It's a trap." As they tried to retreat, Ben unleashed Phase 2 of the plan. Small hidden speakers hidden around the cabin roared to life with the thunderous sound of heavy machine gun fire, unsuppressed, raw, and terrifying. At the same time, a series of strobe lights flickered wildly inside, designed to induce vertigo and confusion. Trapped between the blinding lights and deafening gunfire, Bravo Team was utterly disoriented. They had been skillfully corralled, their years of training rendered useless under the assault of overwhelming senses. They never saw Jack coming. He burst forth from the storm like a specter, a shadow fueled by focused fury. With ruthless precision, he cut through them, using a fierce blend of hand-to-hand combat and targeted, disabling shots. Within minutes, Bravo Team lay wounded, disarmed, and bound with zip ties. Kyle, watching from his van, watched his tactical masterpiece dissolve into chaos. Static flooded his screens, ghost images looped endlessly, and all contact with his teams vanished. He caught sight of the floodlights, heard the terrified screams through his long-range mics, and felt a sinking dread settle in. "Pull out, everyone, get out," he screamed into his dead microphone. Slamming the van into gear, he tried to flee, but Jack was ready for this too, having already given Sheriff Rostova exactly what she needed, a time and a place. As Kyle's van ripped through the winding coastal road, its headlights slicing through the rain, the final act was set in motion, and found himself staring in horror at a massive logging truck jackknifed across the narrow road, freezing his blood in his veins, completely blocking his path while Sheriff Eva Rostova stood firm before it, her silhouette lit by flashing blue and red lights alongside her two steadfast deputies. Shotguns raised and ready, Kyle slammed on the brakes, the van screeching to a jarring stop. His battle was over. Back at the house, rain began to drizzle softly, floodlights casting long, haunting shadows as police vehicles rolled in. Ilara and Lily emerged from the cellar, with Lily rushing straight to Kodiak, burying her face in his soaked, comforting fur. Sheriff Rostova approached Jack as her deputies started processing the captured mercenaries. The mountain of evidence, undeniable. A squad of professional soldiers armed with military-grade, illegally modified weapons, caught in the heart of a brutal home invasion and kidnapping attempt, she said thoughtfully. A slow, satisfied smile spread across her lips. I've got more than enough probable cause to secure a warrant for Apex Holdings. Now the stakes had escalated, but Jack Carter had just turned the entire game upside down. The humbling defeat of the raid sent shockwaves through the highest ranks of a world Silas Vane served, but never truly controlled. Precisely at 8 o'clock the next morning, his phone rang. The caller ID was blocked. The voice calm, refined, carrying the cold, unyielding authority of a man who never needed to raise it. The asset remains unsecured, Silas. It wasn't a question. Unforeseen complications arose. Vane stammered, hating the uncertainty in his own voice. A third-party military-trained complication. The voice replied flatly. Complications are irrelevant. Impatience edged the tone. Your methods have been loud, crude, and ineffective. You have only drawn unwanted attention. This is unacceptable. A consultant is en route to Oak Haven to oversee the final cleanup of the problem. You will extend him every courtesy. His name is Alistair. The line went dead. Vane stared at his phone, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. He knew exactly what consultant meant, what liquidation truly meant. His life was now ticking down. But before Alistair's arrival, he'd take one last shot at winning. To prove his value, he'd shifted from brute force to bureaucratic venom, dialing another phone and saying, "Warren, it's time." Vane growled low and mean. "Unleash the parasites. Health inspectors, zoning agents, child protective services. I want that woman buried so deep. In hearings and violations, she'll beg me to buy that land just to make it stop." The first parasite showed up at 10 o'clock. A small, weasel-faced man in a threadbare suit who introduced himself as Mr. Finch from the county health department. He prowled through Ilara's pristine home like a predator clipboard poised like a weapon. Eyes darting in suspicion. "Improper food storage," he muttered, pointing at a sealed jar of flour perched on an open shelf. "Potential rodent contamination, unsanitary play surfaces," he declared, running a gloved finger along Lily's spotless toy box. Jack and Ben, who were reinforcing the house's defenses, had to pause and trail him. Jack's hands balled into fists, jaw clenched tight. This fight was unlike any he'd faced. He could take out a sniper 1,000 yards away, but he had no weapons against a man like this. Armed with vague health regulations, Finch had barely left the driveway when a large county truck thundered to a stop. Out stepped a massive man with a beer belly and a permanent scowl, Inspector Riggs from Zoning and Construction. He uncovered a long list of pressing faults. The porch steps, he declared, were a mere quarter-inch off from a rule enacted in 1998. The attic wiring, supposedly approved just 2 years earlier, suddenly became a dangerous hazard in his eyes. Slamming a glaring orange violation notice on the front door, he warned of looming fines and potential condemnation. "This is madness," Ilara whispered, her face draining of color as she stared at the threatening notice. "It's not about the house," Ben said softly, his eyes hardening as he watched Riggs drive off. "This is psychological warfare. They're wielding the law to break your spirit." Jack and Ben spent the rest of the day as reluctant handymen, replacing porch steps and inspecting wiring. Their usual tactics held no power in the face of this bureaucratic onslaught. Every hammer strike felt like a surrender. Each fixed violation marked a small defeat, but the cruelest blow came late that afternoon. A plain sedan, unremarkable and quiet, pulled up. The woman who emerged was the most dangerous adversary of all. Her name was Miss Albright, from Child Protective Services, in her 40s. With a polished, empathetic smile that never reached her cold, calculating eyes, she separated the family. She took Lily into the kitchen for a friendly yet pointed conversation, while a stone-faced colleague interviewed Ilara in the living room. Jack and Ben were left outside, pacing restlessly. Jack prowled the porch like a caged beast straining to catch the faint voices within. But it was the silence from Lily that cut the deepest. It was a threat they couldn't see. An enemy they couldn't combat. They were striking at what would force Ilara to give in completely. Her boundless love for her daughter. After what felt like an eternity, Miss Albright reappeared, her professional smile firmly intact. "We'll need to schedule follow-ups," she told Ilara, her tone leaving no room for debate. There will be unannounced visits too. Over the coming weeks, they would monitor Lily's environment to ensure it remained safe and stable. The unspoken threat was stark and unmistakable. One misstep, one more incident, and your daughter will be taken from you. As her car vanished down the road, the message hung heavy in the air. Ilara finally crumbled, sinking onto the porch steps, her face buried in trembling hands, shoulders racked with silent sobs. Jack knelt beside her, unsure how to offer comfort against such a profound wound, his hand hovering gently in hesitation. Far from the storm of emotion at the Hayes home, a man named Alistair stepped off a private jet onto a small airstrip. 2 hours south of Oak Haven, he was of no definable age, dressed in a simple yet expensive gray suit. His face was utterly forgettable, his posture calm and composed. He was the kind of man who passes unnoticed on the street. That was his greatest weapon. He was no thug or soldier, but a ghost, a cleaner who erased problems without a trace. His orders were clear. Go to Oak Haven, evaluate the mess Vane had left behind, and eliminate every loose end that included a Navy SEAL. His tech specialist, a determined widow, her child, and if necessary, Silas Vane himself. The international organization he served tolerated no unfinished business. He didn't head to Apex Holdings or check into any hotel. Instead, he drove a plain, unremarkable rental car into Oak Haven and parked nearby the docks. For a full hour, he sat there quietly observing the heartbeat of the town, with calm, patient eyes that missed nothing like a surgeon studying a patient before making that first cut. Back in Jack's cabin, Ben's systems, which were quietly scanning public traffic cameras, suddenly flagged Alistair's face. The facial recognition software churned relentlessly, cross-referencing against a dozen restricted databases that Ben had access to. Minutes later, Ben paled, his voice barely a whisper when he spoke. "Jack, we have a problem." He flipped his laptop open, revealing a grainy satellite image of chaos unfolding in Yemen. In the smoky, dusty backdrop, almost lost in the turmoil, was that same indistinct man from the rental car. The file attached was heavily redacted, but a few chilling phrases stood out: infiltration neutralization asset, extraction sanctioned wet work. "He's not a mercenary," Ben said grimly. "He's an intelligence operative, a ghost, the kind governments send when they need a problem to vanish without a trace. He's not here to help us, Vane." Jack's eyes shifted from the screen to the warm glow pouring from Alora's window, where a mother was gently soothing her frightened child. Suddenly, the harsh reality of their two-front war snapped into terrifying clarity. They were battling Vane's public war of paperwork and psychological warfare, while a silent, deadlier fight was about to erupt from the shadows. Alistair wasn't here to threaten or negotiate. He was here to erase them. "They're not trying to get her to sign anymore," Ghost Jack growled quietly, his voice steel hard. "They're tying up loose ends, every one of them. Us, Alora, Lily, even Vane." The fight for a patch of land was over. Now the battle for their very lives had just ignited. At 6 o'clock in this morning, the Oak Haven Chronicle hit the internet. By 6:01, Chloe Jenkins's digital-only expose had already flooded inboxes and social feeds all over town. By 7 a.m., the Salty Spoon Diner was packed not with quiet murmurs, but with the buzzing, angry hum of an agitated hornet's nest. Chloe hadn't just leveled accusations. She had dropped undeniable proof. She unearthed the property deeds, shell corporations, and campaign donations. And in a masterstroke of investigative journalism, she revealed a wire transfer, a 5-figure sum from an Apex Holdings subsidiary directly wired to Councilman Warren's private consulting firm. The town's simmering fear, which had lingered like a storm cloud for months, hardened into a sharp collective rage. Jed the old fisherman slammed a printed copy of the article down on the counter. See, his voice thundered. "I told you they're rotten to the core." "He ain't just selling us out," Jed growled. "He's threatening that woman and her kid." Their fury gave them armor, but the threat was evolving faster than fear alone could handle. News of Milo's death broke just after dawn, not on the public airwaves, but discreetly on Ben's laptop. He scanned the encrypted police frequencies like clockwork, a habit ingrained from years in hostile environments. "Dispatch just sent a unit to the old cannery," Ben murmured quietly, eyes glued to the screen. "Anonymous tip. Single male dead on arrival." The description matches our friend Milo. Jack locked his gaze on the wall, the weight of Alistair's presence sinking in. The cleaner hadn't even been here 36 hours, but he was already deep in the hustle, moving fast. He wasn't just chasing down targets. He was dismantling every part of Vane's chaotic empire. Milo, the first and loudest mistake, was the very first name wiped from the slate. Cale and his crew were locked tight in a federal holding cell, yet Milo lingered as an unresolved loose end. Alistair never tolerated loose ends. "This shifts everything." Jack muttered, his mind spinning. Alistair wasn't merely a bystander. He was here to clear out the rot, and right now Vane stood as the biggest festering wound. "We're just waiting for the ghost to erase Vane." Ben Jack shot back, "No. We can't afford that risk. If Alistair takes out Vane, he's going to aim straight for us next to Lara and Lily included. We need to speed this up. Vane has to be the top priority." Jack locked eyes with his teammate. "I need you to track down Vane's money, not Apex's Vane's own cash. That guy's a cocky thief thinking he's smarter than the whole chain. I promise you he's skimming off the top." Ben's fingers raced across the keyboard, his face etched with laser focus. "I'm already inside their local servers. He's careless with firewalls. This is gold. He's running a shadow ledger, siphoning tiny, undetectable amounts from the main Apex budget into an encrypted account tucked away in a bank buried deep in the Cayman Islands." Ben's lips twitched knowingly. He's padding his nest egg. Straight up stealing from his own boss's Jack. "That's it," Jack said. "That's the smoking gun. Alistair isn't just here to clean up a mess, he's protecting an investment. And Vane's the traitor bleeding it dry." Now Jack just had to send the message, and he was heading into the storm alone. It was a risk calculated to the finest detail. Back at the cabin, Ben's hands danced on the keyboard, eyes glued to a drone feed guiding Jack with precision. Ilara and Lily stayed safe under Kodiak's watchful guard, his protective growl a steady promise echoing through the house. Jack walked into the Salty Spoon diner. The murmur died down the instant he stepped inside. Quietly, he took a seat at the counter. He ordered black coffee and waited patiently, painting a target on his back, with every deliberate move making himself vulnerable, reachable. The wait wasn't long. The doorbell chimed softly, but the other patrons barely noticed. The man who walked in, Alistair, was the very essence of unremarkable, cloaked in a gray jacket, his face an unreadable canvas. He moved with a smooth, silent grace, sliding onto the stool next to Jack and signaling for a coffee. "Mr. Carter, Alistair," said, his voice calm, almost casual, as if they were chatting about the weather. He didn't meet Jack's eyes, instead staring into his empty cup. "You're a hard man to pin down. Far from home, too." "So are you," Jack shot back, careful not to touch his coffee. "I'm here to settle a delicate matter," Alistair said. "It seems you, Mrs. Hayes, and the child are obstacles to that resolution. A shame, really. You think I'm the problem?" Jack's voice dropped lower. "No, you're just a complication. Your real problem is Silas Vane." Alistair shifted his gaze, and for the first time a chilly flicker of interest sparked in his eyes. "Mr. Vane is blunt, but at least predictable." "Is that so?" Jack took a bitter sip of coffee. "You're here to straighten out the mess Vane left behind, Kyle Milo. But you're blind to the worst threat. Vane's not just